Alright, so one little quick update. I've been wanting to make the torpedoes light up, and I was having a problem with my coding and electronics, but I finally figured it out. So I've drilled a couple holes here for my torpedoes, and I've got the same red SMD LEDs that I used in my previous video for the lasers, and I'm basically going to do the same thing. I've got two of them wired up here, and then I've got my resistor in place for them, and now I have it glued here in front of the hole. And then again, like I did with my lasers, I'm going to use some black shrink tube, slice it down the middle, and make little sleeves to cover it up for light blocking and just to keep the light contained. So we're starting out here with the top of the body, and I need to cut out an area right here for the wires to come through from the nose cone of the ship. And then I'm also going to cut a section out in the back here where wires will need to come through from my base to power everything. And you can see here I've cut out a trench to allow all my wires, and then I've got my little trench here up front to allow the wires from the nose cone to come through. And I have my little breadboard here that I cut, which will have my positive and negative and data leads for my LEDs. So it's time to start cutting out the sides. And I've spray painted everything black as before, and then a coat of my body paint, AS20 Tamiya white, and already there's nice shading because of the black undercoat. So the instructions show you to put the top and bottom together and then put the sides on, but because of all of my electronics and wiring, I need to do mine a little differently. So for now, I am just going to attach all of the sides to the upper portion of the body. Okay, so here we have the lower half of the body, and this piece here attaches on the bottom like so. And the way the kit comes is the base for the kit attaches into this, but I will not be using that arm that comes with the kit. I'm going to be using a piece of brass tube because I need to run wires for all my electronics through there. So this little piece here, as you can see, is solid, so I need to glue it into position first. So I have it glued in place now, and the next thing I need to do is drill out the center of that up through the inside so that all of my wires can come through the brass tubing, and the tubing will sit inside there, so I need to drill at a slight angle so that my ship is, I want it slightly pointed up and tilted. So I'm going to drill out through here a bit, not all the way through, but just up to those cross pieces on the interior. And my brass rod fits right inside there. And you can see it's at an upward angle and slightly tilted, which is the angle I'm looking for. And you can also see where the tube is held in place, and you can see where the wires will go through. And then the top and bottom pieces will fit together like so. Now my breadboard is going right in here, but this part is going to be in the way. So I need to remove that part before I can proceed with the build. So I'm going to cut that center piece out. And now I have a nice area cut out for my breadboard to fit inside of. And I also cut a little piece here where the R2 unit goes so that my wires can run through there, because that was going to be in the way. Then they'll go through this front portion trench that I cut into the nose cone through that slot there and travel down the body to my breadboard. So here's the R2 unit the kit comes with, and it's got two different heads, so you can pick which R2 you want to use. And the pieces are then cut out, and here I have them put together. So the R2 unit fits in through the top like so. But once he's in place, his foot is kind of in the way of where I need to run my wires through for my LEDs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut his foot off, which will never be seen anyway because I won't be removing my R2 since he's going to be wired with lights. And with his foot cut off, I can stick him back inside here, and you can see how there's a nice empty area there for my wires to run through. So now it's time to take the top portion and put it into the nose cone of the ship. And then I'm going to take my wires from my lasers and from my cockpit LEDs and run them through into the body of the ship. And here I've got my lasers and run through, and my cockpit LEDs all run through into the body of the ship. And then I will do the same thing with the lower half of the nose cone. I need to take my wires from my torpedo LEDs and run them through into the body of the Y-wing. And here we've got them run through, and it's time to snap the bottom half to the top half. And here we have the nose cone assembled with all the wires running through into the body portion of the ship. So here's my breadboard. I've wired a negative and positive wire down it for all my LED wires to attach to. And I have these little plugs here. This one will be a positive negative plug. This one will be 3 wires for my data pins to control the LEDs. And here I've got my power plug attached for positive and negative leads running down each side of the board. And I cut these little pieces of styrene tubing out, which I'm going to use for standoffs inside to hold up my breadboard in place. And I'm going to glue them into those 4 areas, the 4 corners of where the breadboard would go. So I'm going to glue them into place right now with some super glue. And you can see they're glued and dried in place there. And then my breadboard will just drop right inside there and rest on top of those standoffs. And I'll secure it to those standoffs at a later point. So here I've got all of my positive and negative wires from my nose cone LEDs wired up onto my breadboard. And it's time to attach the wings to the body of the ship. So I'll start off with the port side wing here and put it into position. And then the starboard wing or engine and put it into position. So it's time to solder the wires to the breadboard. So I'm just going to be soldering the negative leads from my engine wires to the breadboard, and then I'll be soldering my positive leads from my engine LEDs to the breadboard on the positive side. And then I'm going to use a little bit of Elmer's glue here on the tops of my standoffs, and actually just Elmer's glue the breadboard right in place. Now I've also wired up my little connector with the 3 data pins, and I've cut off both legs now of my R2 unit since I really don't need either of them. And I've now painted in black, and it's time for me to drill out the holes for the eyes of my R2 unit. So I'm going to start out with his main eye, and I'm going to use a 0.75mm drill bit and drill out the center main eye. So I've got it drilled out, and I have my 0.75mm fiber here, and it fits really nicely right into that hole. And here you can see I've got the hole drilled, and also a little 0.25mm hole for his little white eye, and also one on the back side. So it's time to start painting the head of my R2 unit. So I've got his head pretty much painted. Might do some touch up later, but for the most part it's ready. And he will just sit right inside there like so. But there's this piece that needs to go over him, which actually does not fit over the head. Which isn't a big issue, because the body fits right through here like so. And I'll probably glue his body into position anyway, since I'm going to be running lights into his head. And his head will just fit right on top. But because I'm going to glue the body into this part here, I really don't need the legs at all. I mean, anything from the bottom down is pretty much useless. So I'm going to cut off this little portion here because I need to drill through for the LEDs. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut off his last leg, so I just have the body. And at this point, with the body attached to that piece, it'll just drop in place like so. And then when I get his head wired up with the fibers, it'll just go right on top like that. So I'm going to drill out the center of his body so that I can run my fiber optics through. And here I've got it drilled out. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to glue the body onto this upper piece here using some super glue, just a couple drops on the inside. So I purchased these little 0805 SMD RGB LEDs, extremely small as you can see here, and I'm going to wire them up myself. So I'm going to begin by soldering onto the LED here the positive wire. And here both the negative and positive wires are soldered on. And here's just a little test of the LED. And you can see it's red, shifts through yellow to green, shifts from green into blue, and then it'll shift back to red. So R2 does not have green in his eye, it's pretty much red and blue. So what I've done is I've done an extreme close-up of the LED, and through examination figured out which of these is the green portion. And then what I'm going to do here is use an X-Acto knife and carefully go through the plastic coating of the LED and sever the wire to the green LED portion. And here is blue to red, back to blue. So yeah, under extreme magnification, I was able to pinpoint the green LED and poke it out. So then I'm going to take some heat shrink and shrink it over the LED to make a little tube for my fiber optics to go into. So here's my 0.75 fiber optic for the main eye, and I'm painting the tip of it black. So the reason for painting it black is so that when I run the fiber through the head here and it gets into place, it looks like it's black, because when it's off it'll be black. But you can see when I take a flashlight and shine it through the fiber, it'll light up. It's bright enough it comes through the black. Here I've used my heat gun and bent the fiber so that inside the body, when I put it through here, it'll bend back and go back to where I'm going to put the LEDs. So then it's time to run my 0.25 millimeter fiber through for the other two eyes. And I filled the head with Elmer's glue to hold all the fibers in place. Put a little bit of tape there to keep the fibers together. Now that the glue's dried, I'm going to paint it black so there's no light escaping from the head. And then run the fibers through, and there you go. Then the main fiber I'm going to put inside this little tubing so that when I push it into the LED, it'll hold it in place. Here's my two LEDs. This is the white one, this is the RGB, both with resistors soldered into place. And I want to put them so that the resistors are inside this trench here. So here I've got both of them in place. The resistors are inside that trench area. Time to take my R2 unit, put him into position. Then I'm going to take the main eye fiber and put it inside the tube of the RGB LED. And I'm going to use a little bit of Elmer's glue and glue it down into place. And here you can see it's glued into position and held in with some Elmer's glue. Then I'm going to run my 0.25 millimeter fibers into their LED. The bottom portion, I've carved out some of this part here so that when I put the two pieces together it doesn't pinch my wires. So I take my wires from my breadboard, run it through the hole I drilled out in the bottom there, and attach the bottom to the body, and there we have the full body assembled now. Here's just a little tease of the R2 unit working. I'm not going to show anything else, but I have tested the entire ship and all of my LEDs are working with the body put together. So my last video will be putting the external piping on the ship, painting the ship, and then doing all of my electronics in the base.